All right, everybody, welcome back into another episode of Stadium Seat Sports. As always, I am Coop here with my partner and co-host Kriv. And sorry to be getting this video out a little bit late here, but this video we're going to be looking at the two remaining bowl games here in the inaugural 12-team college football playoff. We can also briefly touch on how we got to these two matchups because we didn't do a recap of the previous rounds games, although we did do a preview for those games. So I think, Kriv, we're just going to go in order here. We'll start with the Orange Bowl happening tomorrow night, Thursday. And it's going to be Penn State and Notre Dame in this matchup. I think it's an interesting matchup because I think they do a lot of the same things very well. So I'll throw it over to you to kind of get your take on the game, and then I'll give you my thoughts.
No, I think in that little comment you just made, it kind of defines this matchup. These are very similar style teams. They both have great defenses, and they really rely on, for the most part, you think a two-man rushing attack on both sides of the ball. Obviously, Riley Leonard and Drew Aller are very different quarterbacks. Riley, of course, is I don't know if you call him a run first guy, but he definitely you lean on his legs a lot more than you lean on his arm and down the field ability.
Sure.
And Aller's the other way. Aller does have the ability to run, but of course his big arm is what everyone's always talking about. So
Mhm.
his ability to stretch the field. So I think that's really going to be where this game kind of gets decided. And it's one, which Drew Aller shows up because he is starting to get a lot of hype as far as like potential draft prospects and stuff like that.
Sure.
Some people didn't really think beforehand, but if you look at his numbers more closely, they're not that great.
Mhm.
Round one against SMU was solid. Boise State just okay. So
Yeah. I think
um,
when, not to cut you off, I think when people are looking at him, at least from my take, in talking about his draft stock maybe increasing. Like he's a prototypical what you would want build wise from a
yeah,
quarterback, but I do think we need to see more in game with the talent that he has and just the pure physical ability he has. But I think from a
yeah.
physical standpoint, he's like maybe like a Josh Allen light. I don't think he's quite that big, but like in terms of like a prototypical football build you want in the NFL, he kind of fits the mold.
Yeah, and I agree. He's big, strong, tall, cannon arm, like exactly. So, but for me, yeah, that's kind of where this matchup kind of divides itself, and it's going to be a tale of which comes through. So Riley Leonard, he's not going to throw the ball all over. He has to have timely passes, and he had some of those against Georgia. Uh, but the big thing with him is his run game threat. And that's where things, even a good defense like Penn State, can run into issues because Riley Leonard, his running ability paired with those running backs, and also I don't know if Jeremiah Love is, I know he's practicing and they said he's going to give it a go. I don't know what
Right.
version we're going to get. But like I said, they're too deep running back room. And you can argue, I can't even remember. I don't know why I'm drawing a blank on his name. The second string running back who,
For Notre Dame.
yeah,
Um,
Price, Jadarian Price. He might be more dynamic than Jeremiah Love. So
yeah. Jeremiah loves like a wrecking ball.
yeah, so I mean, and so is Riley Leonard. So
True. True.
you look at those guys, and it's can Penn State weather that? And
Hmm.
the thing that comes back to my mind is you go all the way back to when Ohio State played at Penn State in October, and they had that final drive with like 4 minutes left, where they
Hmm.
just ran the ball every single play, and Penn State knew the run was coming, and they could not stop it.
Yeah,
Um,
that's true.
and that gives me pause here because Riley Leonard, he is a better running quarterback than Will Howard. Will Howard's a decent one, but Riley Leonard is better at running it.
Yes, for sure.
Those two running backs on Notre Dame, even if Jeremiah Love is banged up and doesn't play as much, Price is
Hmm.
good enough to still be a top tier back.
Sure.
That Notre Dame O line is very solid. So
Yeah, it
uh,
always is.
yeah, so that gives me a slight lean, I think, towards Notre Dame, and also Abdul Carter being hurt. They've said
Yeah.
he may
Do
or
we
may
know the
not go.
status? Okay.
No,
Yeah.
no, yeah, I think they're kind of keeping it under wraps right now, and
Hmm.
rightfully so.
I mean, we're
Um,
24 hours as of this recording, 24 hours out from the game time. So if we don't know yet, I think it'll be a game time decision at this point, I
I'd
would assume.
I'd imagine they'd give it a go, but you just never know. You never know with these
Yeah,
injuries. So
right.
this guy's got a top 5 pick coming up. So if he's out, that's something. But yeah, I keep thinking back to that game, and even though I think Drew Aller's gotten better,
Hmm.
Tyler Warren is a complete X factor. Uh, Allen and Singleton, Penn State. I mean, these guys are loaded too, and that's
Yep.
nothing to sneeze at. But the way I think Notre Dame kind of stepped up against Georgia gives me a little more confidence in their ability to get some stops against Penn State.
Sure.
And this is going to be a drag fight. Like they're going to be beating the crap out of each other on this one. And I just think at the end of the day, when you have three guys who can run the ball, including the quarterback, and that type of fight,
Yep.
I'm going to go Notre Dame. I think the spread's -1.5 right now. It should be a pick
Hmm.
'em. I mean,
Yeah.
these teams are very close,
Yep.
and one big play here or there will probably decide it. So
Yeah.
it might not be a 3-point game. It could be a touchdown game, but it might be whoever had that one big play. So,
Sure. I mean,
but
it could
yeah,
honestly come down to who has the ball last too. You know what I mean? Like I do think it should essentially be a pick 'em game. Like I agree with you. I'm going to tell you my pick right off the bat. I'm going to touch on a couple of points that I didn't hear you touch on or didn't touch on too
sure.
much.
Yeah,
I'm also picking Notre Dame in this game. And really two main reasons that I'm picking Notre Dame beyond what you already mentioned. The great O line, Riley Leonard, like he's great with his legs. Like Notre Dame, although it was not the flashiest, it wasn't the most impressive point differential against the Georgia Bulldogs. I thought Notre Dame manhandled the Georgia Bulldogs, and that's not easy to do. Like Georgia's a very physically dominating team under Kirby Smart with some really, really great athletes across the board. Like I thought Notre Dame held their own and then some when it came to the
yeah,
physical game against Georgia, which really, really impressed me. The two reasons that, I didn't really hear you touch on for that I'm picking Notre Dame, that I'm leaning towards Notre Dame, and it's not by any significant margin. I'm not expecting a Notre Dame blowout of Penn State. Number one, I trust the Notre Dame coaching staff
yep. I completely missed
heartedly
that. Yep,
more than the Penn State coaching staff. I like Marcus Freeman over James Franklin. I like Al Golden more than what Penn State has in the same position group. Like I've seen from this Notre Dame coaching staff them get the most out of this team since that ugly, ugly loss to Northern Illinois. And yes, you can hang your hat on Marcus Freeman with that, where they've had some ugly losses. Northern Illinois this year, Marshall a couple of years ago. Like they've had some losses where you just sit there scratching your head, like Notre Dame should not lose to these programs, and they do. And excuse me, and that's fair. But at the same time, when I look top to bottom, Notre Dame coaching staff to Penn State coaching staff, I favor Notre Dame. And I think when you have similar talent and you play similar play styles,
yeah,
that can come into play. So that has me leaning towards Notre Dame. The other thing, I know the talent is there with Penn State, but I mean, truthfully, if I'm sitting here asking you, what's Penn State's best win this year? Like, is their best win a loss to Ohio State? Like, truthfully, because what do we know about Penn State in this playoff? They got SMU and then they got Boise State. Like, at least Notre Dame took on Georgia. Yes, a Carson Beckless Georgia team,
sure.
but Georgia's very talented. Georgia's far better than Boise State or SMU. So, like, I just and the one, you know, top five matchup or matchups that Penn State had, they lost both of them, Ohio State and Oregon. Now they didn't look terrible in either of those losses. They looked like they could compete on the field with both of those teams. So this isn't, some take absolutely eviscerating the Penn State football program. I think very highly of them. But truthfully, what is their best win? Is their best win a loss to Ohio State or a loss to the Oregon Ducks in the Big Ten championship game? Like I don't know what I can take from SMU and Boise State in this
Yeah,
playoff field.
and real
I
quick
just don't.
to that point, in those two losses,
Mm-hmm.
they got gashed on the ground in both those games.
Yep.
And that goes right into Notre Dame's strengths.
Correct.
So we'll see
Correct.
what happens because obviously Ohio State, Oregon, better pass games that can open
Yes.
up the run, but just
Yes.
to keep that in mind.
Yes. And it's just I don't know what I'm getting out of Penn State. Like this Penn State team seems to be playing very, very well. They seem to be playing like a team with their backs against the wall, that's got nothing to lose. And that's a very dangerous team. Just look at Ohio State, whom we'll touch on here in just a little bit when previewing the Cotton Bowl. But at the same time, the two teams that are the best teams Penn State's faced all year, they lost to both of them. And it's no disrespect to Boise State or SMU, but they're no Georgia, they're no Ohio State, they're no Oregon, and they're no Notre Dame. And so until I see Penn State go out and prove it against a team of this caliber, it has me favoring their opponent in the matchup, which is why I'm leaning towards Notre Dame. Notre Dame's defense is also nasty. Like it
Yeah.
is very, very good. Really, really solid, hard hitting, physical. And we have seen at times throughout this year that Andy Kotelnicki offense at Penn State flourish. We have also seen it crumble at times. And so if this Notre Dame team, like the way that they were able to get to Georgia's quarterback, and his name is blanking in my head right now because he's only had one start. I don't know if you know it off the top of your head.
I
I keep thinking Carson Beck, and I'm like, that's not it. That's not.
think it starts with an S.
Yeah, it's
Gunner, is it Gunner Stockton or
Gunner
something?
Stockton. Yep,
Yeah.
that's correct. Thank you. They got to Gunner Stockton really often. Like
Yeah.
Penn State was able to put so much pressure on Gunner Stockton. If they can do the same thing against Penn State, or Notre Dame rather, is able to get so much pressure on Gunner Stockton. If they are able to do the same thing against Penn State, Drew Aller and that Penn State offense could be in for a long day. And Notre Dame, it's not pretty, it's not flashy, but they will basically strangle you to death with just physical, dominant football. It's very similar almost to like what Michigan has done over the past several years. Like Michigan was never amazing at wide out. They never had like these incredible wide receivers, but they were like tough, physical on both lines, and they just essentially strangled you throughout the entirety of the game. Like Notre Dame sort of reminds me of that. Not, a perfect comparison, but almost like a Michigan light in their approach
Yeah.
to how they kind of operate. And so I think that could spell trouble for Penn State. And yes, this was a long time ago. This is well over a month ago that Ohio State drive happened that you mentioned. But Ohio State's not a particularly good running the football team, or they've shown an inability to run the football on several different occasions. They essentially iced the game against Penn State in their home stadium by just sustaining a long 5+ minute drive of ramming the football down their throats. And that's really what Notre Dame does so well, far better than what Ohio State does on an average basis typically. And so I think that ultimately could be very difficult for Penn State. And that's something we thought that like Genty and Boise State were going to be able to do, but to a lesser degree because they're not nearly as physically, intimidating and dominating as Notre Dame. So, and Genty did have some success. He also had, a couple of fumbles. He didn't have his best day out there for sure. But Notre Dame is able to match Penn State's physicality and athleticism much more than Boise State can. And I think that formula that we mentioned in that matchup can work. And Notre Dame has a better opportunity to actually take advantage of that against Penn State than a Boise State did. So
Yeah.
I'm taking Notre Dame. I think it'll be a very hard fought, close game, but I'm going to take the Fighting Irish to make their first appearance in a national championship game since when? Was it 2012,
Yeah.
2013? When was it? Was it 2012?
20 Urban Meyer's first year because Ohio State went undefeated and
2012.
they should have played. So
Yeah, it was at Alabama Notre Dame, right? It was 2012, I think.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, 2012. So I'm picking the Fighting Irish to make their first appearance in a
yeah.
national championship game, and since 2012.
I agree. And speaking of Urban Meyer's first year, his former team, Ohio State, back in the Cotton Bowl after maybe the worst game they've played in a very long time.
Yeah.
At the Cotton Bowl last year, 3 points,
Yep. Against
going
Missouri.
against the hometown team, Texas. So I'll let you kick things off there if you'd like,
Yeah.
and we can take a look at that.
Yeah. This one's really, really interesting to me because had Texas continued on the trajectory that it started against Arizona State, where they were up 17-3, I believe, and they were dominating Arizona State in so many different facets of the game. And this is kind of a microcosm of Texas's season. They start out really well, they get a big lead, and then they tend to squander it in the second half, or the game becomes much closer than what it should be. And if Texas had gone out and just dominated Arizona State, I would have looked at that game and said, okay, I think Texas can really, really give Ohio State a game. And I'm not discrediting Texas. I think Texas is fast, they're physical. I think they're right up there with Ohio State in terms of talent. I think Ohio State is the most talented team remaining, but Texas is a close second. They are
Yeah.
closer to Ohio State in talent than Notre Dame or Penn State
I'd
are.
say I'd say any other team in college.
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. At the same time, like their defense, we talk about Notre Dame's defense being nasty, Penn State's defense being nasty. Texas's defense is real. That is a very real defense. And so they've got weapons everywhere. Texas's, to me, keys to success in this game. Which Quinn Ewers are we getting? Are they going to sprinkle in Arch Manning in there? That's always a possibility. So we'll see. We'll see about that
Yeah.
because
Yeah. That's an X factor.
right. And for both of these games, both the Cotton Bowl and the Orange Bowl, these are two of these teams' last games of the year. So you're going to see some tricks. You're going to see teams going all out. This isn't like, oh, we'll see you next week or we'll see you, down the line in the postseason. This isn't a regular season game. Like this is going to be the end for two of these teams. Only two of them are moving on to the national championship here. So we could see some wrinkles thrown in there, like Quinn Ewers playing alongside Arch Manning. Texas's ability to run the football is a big question mark to me. If Texas can run the football, they can have a lot of success and they can give Ohio State some problems.
Yeah.
If they are unable to run the football, because Ohio State's defensive line, especially the way Ohio State's defense has been playing over these last several weeks, and even going back to the Michigan game, the defense was solid in that game. The defense was solid in that Michigan game.
They gave up 13 points.
Right. They weren't perfect.
But
I know Michigan's anemic on offense, but the defense was not the problem in that game. And then in the Tennessee game, they were nasty. I mean, my goodness, that Rose Bowl game, that hit Lathan Ransom put on Oregon's running back. I can't remember if it was their starter or not. I didn't know if he was hurt already at that point because he had gone out at some point in the game.
That was
absolutely disgusting. Quick, that defense is flying around. You go ahead.
Quick point. I saw the stat today. In the Rose Bowl, Ohio State only brought a blitz 3 times.
Yeah, they were still getting home to Dylan Gabriel.
They had 8 sacks.
Yeah,
so
I think that's more times. Gabriel was sacked more times. Correct me if I'm wrong. He was sacked more times in that game than all season combined.
I believe it. I don't have that in front of me, but I definitely believe it.
Like I don't think he was sacked more than 8 times all season long, and he was sacked 8 times in that game. Like Jack Sawyer for Ohio State is on another level right now. JTT on another level. The guy that I think is not talked about quite as much, but has been all over the field and has just been so incredible. Cody Simon for Ohio State has been so good.
Yeah.
I think Cody Simon and this Ohio State defense are just playing like a team that has nothing to lose, and that's extremely dangerous. Extremely dangerous. So I already briefly touched on like a few things that I think Texas needs to do well, or like which versions of these players are we going to get in order for them to, compete and potentially win this game. On the flip side for Texas's defense, like they've got to have an answer. If you are going to stomp this Ohio State team, you have to have an answer for number 4. The problem is if you have an answer for number 4, well, you got number 2 out there running free or running with single coverage. And he's every bit as capable of torching your defense and going off for a huge game. I mean, Jeremiah Smith is an absolute alien. That guy is just physically one of the most gifted players I've ever seen come into college football. But Emeka Egbuka is no slouch. He's absolutely incredible. He could break Ohio State's I think receiving record. I can't remember exactly what he needs, but it's like 8 catches, 100 some odd yards. Like that guy is that guy's incredible. So if you have a plan for number 4, like you're going to double team number 4, or drop a safety into coverage and help out with that. Well, you're leaving Emeka Egbuka on an island, and
Carnell Tate
and Carnell Tate.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to me how Texas's defense handles just the plethora of weapons that Ohio State has. I think the key for Texas And Ohio State's offensive line's been doing a really good job against Tennessee and against Oregon. And they've got some good defensive lines. Texas is the best defensive line they'll faced up to this point, for sure. I think Texas's defensive line is better than Oregon's and it's better than Tennessee's. They've got to get pressure on Will Howard because if Will Howard can just sit back there, Will Howard has shown you that he is capable of picking apart some very, very talented defenses. This Ohio State team, to me, it's like almost like a nuke is dropped against Tennessee and against Oregon. They strike and they strike quickly. And by the time you look up at the scoreboard, it's 24 to nothing, 34 to nothing, 21 to like it's just before you even know what hit you, you're already essentially knocked out of the fight. And with
Yeah.
the way that the Ohio State defense is playing, that's even more so true. So Texas, the keys for Texas really has to get off to a fast start in the first quarter. And I could say a fast start by being like, you're up 10-7 or you're down 10-7, but you're not down 21 to nothing or
Yeah.
24 to 3, right? Because Ohio State's far too talented and their defense is flying around far too much for you to try and realistically overcome that type of deficit. So Texas has to withstand the Ohio State just avalanche that has been coming in the first quarter and a half of their last several games. And then for Ohio State, I mean, my analysis is really just keep doing what you're doing. Like, I
Yeah.
don't really have much critique of Ohio State right now. The only thing that I would say is Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, Jim Knowles, your entire coaching staff, you're the odds on betting favorites now. Everybody's in your corner. Everybody's like, man, you guys are going to be near impossible to beat if you play like that. Don't let that talk get into your head. Keep your team focused. Keep your team with that chip on their shoulder and go to work and do what you do. Because at the end of the day, you've had two fantastic wins, Tennessee and Oregon. But at Ohio State, you've not yet accomplished anything remotely close to what your goal is, which is the national championship. So for Ohio State, you still got a lot to play for here. Like, you're happy about the Tennessee win. You're thrilled about the Oregon win. They're great. Doesn't mean anything if you're Ohio State.
Yeah.
So for the coaches I just mentioned, Day, Kelly, Knowles, keep your team focused. Don't let them hear that outside noise that are saying they're impossible to beat. No one's going to beat them. They're already the national championships. They're national champions. It just hasn't happened yet. That, as Nick Saban would say, rat poison. Like, keep
Yeah.
your team
Yeah.
focused, keep that chip on the shoulder. But I really don't have much to say about Ohio State in terms of like what I would do, what they need to like get the ball to number 4. He's an alien. Offensive line, keep protecting really well. Defense, keep flying around like the maniacs playing with your hair on fire. And Travion Henderson and Quinshawn Junkins, when that passing game opens up, boy, does it open up some lanes for them. And when
Yes, it
they open
does.
up some lanes, my gosh, by the time I blinked, Travion Henderson was in the back, was in the, right behind Howard taking the pass. And then I blinked and he was in front of every Oregon defender walking his way into the end zone. I'm like, my God, that guy is an absolute race car. Like,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable the plethora of weapons that this team has. And you're seeing them play at their full potential. And it's scary. And I agree with people that if Ohio State plays to their full potential, I don't think that there is a team that will beat them, but they have to continue to play at that level. And we've never seen college kids play this many games. So it's a question mark. Can Ohio State sustain this level of play both Friday and if they win into the national championship game on January 20th? Like, this is an extremely long season for college kids. We've never seen it before. Like, this is the first time this is happening where they're playing 16, 17 games. Can they keep that same level? So with all that said, Ohio State's just humming on a different level right now for me. Like, I'm taking Ohio State. I have a lot of respect for Texas. I have a lot of respect for Steve Sarkisian, Quinn Ewers. That team I think is incredible. I just think Ohio State, if they're playing confident, they keep that chip on their shoulder. I don't see Texas beating them. I just don't. If we get that version of Ohio State. So I'm even with the home crowd factor, Ohio State fans are as good as any fans in college football at traveling. There will be a good amount of Buckeye fans there. So I'm taking Ohio State in this game.
Yeah. So I think you hit on a few key points, and I'd like to go into those, but also a few others. And first and foremost, yes, I think Ohio State's going to win this game. But there is that seed of doubt in my mind because Ryan Day is the head coach, and we've seen
Sure.
him get in his head, get in his own way. We saw that trickle down to Chip Kelly's play calling as well in the game a month ago. So really, it's those two guys, especially Ryan Day, keeping that edge. They've played with an edge. The guys are playing on fire.
Can
It's a
Can I give you
different,
something to talk about really quickly? I want
yeah,
you to talk about this, but I forgot to mention this, and I think it's key. Ohio State does have some bulletin board material, and I'm sure that they have seen this. Emmanuel Acho said that Will Howard is the worst quarterback remaining of the four.
yeah. I think that's ridiculous.
I agree with you, and I think Ohio State should use that, and I think
Yeah,
they will.
yeah, I think they will too. And another thing to not overlook also is Will Howard. He lost to Texas last year at Kansas State, but he had arguably his best
True.
collegiate game against
I
Texas.
forgot about that.
Yeah, I think he threw for 4 touchdowns in a very close loss.
Yeah, I remember
Um,
watching that game.
yeah, so and obviously he's on a much better team now. So that gives me some confidence in Will Howard in this situation. But really, yes, going back to the coaches, Ryan Day, Chip Kelly, and just the players, that mentality cannot change. You found something that
Sure.
works, you have to stick with that. That is your identity. Your
Hmm.
identity is go straight for the throat and kill them. And they've done that. So
Yep, I fully agree.
don't get cute. Don't let up on the gas pedal. You have everything you need. By looking at Texas, and one of the big things you mentioned is Texas seems to start hot, go
Hmm.
cold. And I've been doing some research on them, and a lot of Texas writers have said, well, Steve Sarkisian scripts the first two, three drives of the game, and he's an evil mastermind. He is an
Hmm.
incredible offensive coach. That's when Texas looks unbeatable. It's those
Sure.
opening drives. They start games 14 nothing, 17 nothing. And guess what? Then they stop scoring all of a sudden. And
Hmm.
because the game's no longer scripted. So if Ohio State can start the game and just find a way to get a stop during those scripted series,
Hmm.
and let's say they score, they find a way to score too, 7 nothing, 10 nothing.
Yep.
After the first quarter, those two scripted drives for Texas, I think it might be game over. And it
Yeah.
sounds crazy, but it's because Texas does not have the consistency that you would like to
Correct.
see. And it honestly, the way Texas kind of looks is how Ohio State looked before the playoffs started.
Hmm.
Super talented, no consistency. Quarterback was making throws, and you're like, what? It would look amazing, and then there'd be like a head scratching throw.
Yep.
The similarities are there.
I
Uh,
mean, when these teams are both so talented, if they both play up to their standard and what they're capable of, we could have, I mean, just an absolutely dynamic game. We could have an Ohio State Oregon part one all over again,
yeah,
where it's
no,
like,
yeah, yeah.
you know what I mean? Like incredible.
The Texas talent's there. I'm not sure the consistency is.
Hmm.
Um, and sorry, Quinn Ewers has one of the best arms ever. I mean, it is such a live arm. It is crazy. People really don't appreciate it. But then he'll have a random throw that he just floats out there and it gets
Hmm.
picked off. So we know that Ohio State's secondary is elite. Um, but they do have Gunnar Helm, who I think might be the best tight end. He's neck and neck with Tyler Warren.
Yeah.
But Ohio State has a guy, Caleb Downs, who got put on Tyler Warren. He'll be put on Helm, and he will try to take away one of Quinn's best weapons.
Yep.
I think Marcus Golden's been great. Uh, Isaiah Bond, I know he's been hurt off and on, and I don't know if he's going to play or if he does, how he's going to perform. Uh, both the Texas's offensive tackles are banged up, so even though they're very good tackles, they might not
Hmm.
be 100%. And another thing, the biggest concern from like a player personnel perspective for Ohio State is the offensive line. And they have stepped up. And I think part of the reason they've stepped up and done well is because Chip Kelly's done a masterful job to put them in positions to succeed.
Agreed.
But the other thing is round one against Tennessee, they had James Pierce Jr. against them. No,
Hmm.
little to no impact. Um, last game against Oregon, they had Birch and they had Matayo.
Yep.
Little to no impact. And those guys are all top tier talents.
Correct.
Texas has Colin Simmons. That guy is an absolute game wrecker.
Mhm.
Um, and if they can neutralize him, that is such a key part of Texas's defense and his pass rush that I'm not sure they can overcome. So
Yeah,
that's the key. That's the key matchup for me where things can get blown up. So it's either going to
sure.
be Ohio State's O line and offense game plan again, and they're able to neutralize a guy like Simmons, or Simmons can blow this game open
Yeah.
and get pressure on Will Howard, and he makes mistakes. So that is the little sliver I have as far as a personnel perspective that Texas could possibly take advantage of, even though Ohio State has proven the last 2 weeks or 2 games, I should say, that they can handle it. So. With that being said, though, I do think Ohio State wins this game. Spreads -5.5 as of this recording. I think that might be a little low. I think I
It
think
started at 6.5, right? Or
I think it started at 5 actually.
it started at
So
5?
it has talent wise, they're right there. But
Do you agree
Texas,
with this? Ohio State has the most talented player both on offense and on defense.
yeah, Smith and
Jeremiah
Downs,
Smith and
yeah,
Downs. Okay.
yeah. So Ohio State just needs to have that aggression, get the
Mhm.
ball to Smith, let the defense do their thing, let Downs do his thing. If 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 it's early on and Ohio State gets stops, keep an
Mhm.
eye on that because that's going to be the separator. So, yeah, and the other just small little tidbit here as well. I know the game was 9 days ago. By the time game day comes, that ASU game took a lot out of Texas,
It did.
and I mean, I know they had some time to recover, but that was a slugfest. They got put to the grinder. They got put through it mentally. I know it's been a little bit of time, but that's something that catches up with you, and especially with a team like Texas that starts hot, goes cold. If they're worn down by the second half, that's really bad news. So,
Yeah.
um,
Well, and the other thing too, because I kind of briefly touched on it though, is Arizona State's defensive line was able to get home against Texas and they were able to stop the run or at least minimize it. Arizona State's defensive line is not as good as Ohio State's defensive
no,
line. So if I were a Texas fan, that would give me pause. That would give me a little bit of hesitation in thinking that Texas is going to come in here and be able to be multifaceted on the offensive side of the ball and have a lot of success because Ohio State's defensive line is superior to Arizona State's defensive line, and Arizona State's defensive line had some success. So
yeah, it's gonna be interesting. I mean, Texas has the talent on paper. We haven't really seen it in
yeah,
action. So, but you could say the same thing about Ohio State just a few games ago. So
that's true.
anything can
That's true.
happen, but I'm going to go with Ohio State.
Yeah. Well, in the last round, man, we were the same on all four picks and we went 4 for 4.
4 for 4.
So
Yep.
we went same picks this round. We went Notre Dame both and we went Ohio State both. So it'll be interesting to see if we continue our
Yeah,
streak here
we shall see.
of correct picks. But guys, as always, we really appreciate you guys tuning in, listening to any of our episodes here, interacting with us on the socials. We'll do a recap of these two games. And then, of course, we'll do a preview for the national championship game on January 20th. So, as always, take care, enjoy these games. We only have a few left in this college football season. So, we got to enjoy them while we can. And we'll see you guys on the next one.